Hi, this is Mark. In this video, I'm going to talk about confidence and what entails, whether someone has or exhibits a true sense of confidence, and kind of what distinguishes confidence from arrogance. But I like to consider it in terms of stability. Like for instance, if we consider we have everyone has an identity or a unique identity formulated through from the birth throughout um, adolescence and into early adulthood. The identity is constructed, and we exhibit these core traits that stick with us or kind of distinguish us in terms of personality. And these core traits are like, to me, it's kind of analogous to a bond, or a chemical bond, or a mineral. Every mineral or minerals, there's generally planes of weakness or bond strength, and weak bonds are easy to break, like they may along the plane of weakness. And I like to think of the core traits as like reinforcing agents for the bond. And when you have these strong traits or core traits, what it implies is there's stability of the mineral. It doesn't destabilize, or it doesn't change form and expression. So I like to think of confidence in the same way. It's proportional to the strength of the core traits. True confidence is stability. It's not. It's opposite of volatility. Volatility is when one exhibits self-esteem problems, which we all have. But the more volatile you are, the more there's a relationship between volatility and insecurity. So if one is like to uh, really project their insecurities based on uh, minute uh, circumstances that aren't uh, shouldn't be conceived to create such a reaction, um, or if the reaction is emphasized in a negative direction to such a high degree relative to the norm or what we define as a norm, this can show it's it, this show the weakness or the planes of weakness, the instability, and so forth. And that's what creates. That just means that these core traits weren't developed, and that's a lot of cases. There's been like abuse, so forth, and early on, it can create these planes of weakness, which are like nervous system reactions, or there's a connection between the nervous system and the what the previous trauma or neglect, and so forth. That's why there's disorders such as BPD or borderline personality, which it doesn't mean weakness. It's just the expression of when I say planes of weakness. It's like it doesn't take a lot to induce to cause the plane to essentially break, and that causes like the instability or the negative reaction. It's more of an analogy, and some people with BBT know that like they have more triggers for volatility or volatile reactions, and relative to um, individuals who don't display that condition. So nothing to do with being weak, but because if anyone exhibited trauma or abuse, would actually weaken their core identity. It's for every case it would be weakened to some degree based on initial temperament and initial conditions. But someone who's confident, they don't need to mask. They don't need to change their persona. They don't need to display an act, or they don't need to. A key distinguishing feature among someone who's very confident and someone who's not is rate of is just a change. someone who's confident is comfortable in their own skin. They don't need to this. They don't need to receive validation. I think, as much to a high degree, they're satisfied uh, and content with with what has transpired as they move through life. And everyone wants to receive some form of validation. So we can't really have the true confidence, but we can we can dictate it based on stability, how stable a person is in their life. And if someone is higher degree of volatility, it just shows more self issues with self worth and so forth. Now, there's other disorders like narcissism, which is like kind of like a projection of an image that you want. It's an image that you almost create, a persona, an identity that you formulate from your mind so that you can derive the most reward that you, based on what you perceive would yield the highest reward. And that's kind of the or that's what narcissism entails. It's more so to do with it is also kind of like a projection, and of course they can exude confidence, or they may not. It will actually be displayed as a form of stability because it's very hard to track. Uh, you know, to a narcissist makes it very difficult to actually read into any weakness. It's very hard to detect any of that, and so forth. Um, but I think in terms of narcissism, it's very much. I think we all have narcissistic traits. It's a spectrum disorder, just like any other disorder is a spectrum disorder, and it's more so tied to the ego, and it could be also tied to neurochemical uh, neurochemical um, balance or no neurochemical how would I put this changes or sensitivity of the neurochemical system. Um, you could think of like when you have a lot of dopamine, you tend to become delusional, excessively have the probability, higher probability of becoming excessively prideful or um, euphoric, and kind of just uh, go in the direction of mania, which mania can kind of overlap with narcissism to a degree based on the expression, the manifestation of all uh, of the illness itself and just the actions that persist. It kind of creates the can create an illusion as well, and it's really hard to really define true narcissists, but really they're it's like ADHD, where in a person with ADHD um, has problems with yielding reward for typical tasks that a normal neurotypical person would derive. They would derive a you could let's suppose it's like we could if we consider it a normal response, which we can't really define normal or normality. But if it's a normal response, a person with ADHD displays a lower or dampened response relative to the normality. Um, so to compensate, they have to hyper focus on interest or engage in a lot of or derive a lot of stimuli or more stimuli than is normal to yield yield an average reward or yield a typical reward or um, even a higher degree of reward than what is typical because they have a constant thirst for it. It's the thirst is much stronger. So same with the narcissist. The reward with the basically the reward system. They try to maximize the output, and they learn through manipulation or intellectual capacity or um, to take on a false image to an extent, but I think we all kind of can take on a false image. So that's why it's on the spectrum. Um, Basically, it's more a delusion with in terms of if we consider that we naturally will get a biologically speaking, we would get a reward for performing some action. Well, narcissists will overestimate that uh, the reaction will be an overestimate of the value that is let's just suppose is typical, a typical reaction based on the biochemical network. And that's probably why maybe excess dopamine could create narcissistic tendency because now the feedback is strengthened. So therefore, the response is strengthened in proportion to the feedback. And so it's atypical. It's not of a reaction. And so anything that becomes atypical, we tend to define and we tend to associate with the disorder, something that goes beyond the norm. We like labeling things. Uh, but we all display degrees of it. Maybe just like autism is a spectrum disorder. We all may just have some traits, but not necessarily be autistic. Um, so, yeah, with confidence, it can be deceiving. Um, Someone's confident because they're comfortable in their shoes. They don't mind um, admitting about failures, or they stay humble, typically true to their word. They are um, they know their strengths and weaknesses. They don't project any of the insecurities. Um, they maintain transparency and are very consistent with action. So if you were to note someone who changes with different environments, that's generally either a projection or the person does so to yield a goal that they want to achieve. Um, and they do so for manipulating their persona to uh, succeed, but that through their lens. So yeah, it's kind of hard sometimes to distinguish between confident individual, someone who's maybe arrogant, or but arrogance is more of a projection. Um, it's more of a facade. It's a play or a act, whereas confidence, true confidence, is sincere, or it's a um, the intent is to there is no there is no intent or nothing to show. There's no need to prove anything, no need to boast, no need to talk about accomplishments because they're satisfied essentially. So yeah, that's just my take on it. Um, Feel free to comment if you have another um, definition or way you view confidence, your perspective, and I'll appreciate that, and hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you next time.